season to season. I have been fooled before, and just because this summer seems so long, it might not be my last. Winter could come again and pause the sky like a taped tactical descent of pocket paratroopers. Things to see could happen yet, and life prove not quite spent, but still abundant, still the main event. The trick I'm learning is to stay in doubt, season to season, of what time might bring, and patiently await how things turn out. Eventually, time tells you everything. If it takes time to do so, no surprise in that. You fold your arms, you scan the skies, and tell yourself that life has made you wise. If only by the way it ebbs away. But still it takes an age, and after all, though nearly gone, life didn't end today. And you might be here when the first leaves fall, or even when the snow begins again, if life that cast you when this all began as a small boy still needs a dying man. 3 mountains high. Oh, you are a deep and marvelous blue. It was with my palms that I rounded out your slopes. There was an easy calmness, an irrelevant ease that touched me, and I stretched my arms and smoothed 3 mountains high. Dear Eros, I asked my son which part of his body he loved most. He said his skeleton. I always used to think I loved my toes, a quarter of my bones splayed into fans, the nerves so bright and easy to please. A friend's daughter showed me the bones she'd filed in an old card catalog. I handed each one back, the dull heat of rot traded for the glare white of a bare rib, fleshless cradle of hip, heft of femur on a mantle. She and I shared our love of lemons, and she taught me which in her made-up language so I could call myself by the proper word, the invented one. I held myself against the hard belly of those vowels, that black glyph of a name. The pulse I once felt when my son turned inside me thrummed against my hand. Tonight, the splinter I let live in my thumb finally worked its way out of my flesh, the wound larger than the weapon. I asked my son which part of his life he loved most. He said crying, because it felt so good to stop when he was happy again. The daughter shows me the thin hair of roots whitening the soil in a jar. She has made this small wilderness and given it life. When my marriage was failing, I offered to take care of my friend's succulent. It was almost winter. Everything was going gray. So when the plant began to bloom, I welcomed its dusty pollen until the kitchen smelled like carrion and bone dust. The house grew heavy with need. With an ache I understood. The smell of death was simple to answer. I knew what those fetid yellow stars required. I opened the back door to invite the flies to their desire. Adonis. I forgave him the debt of having to explain where he came from, who his angry father and his loving mother were. Or I relieved him from any excuse and sat dozens and dozens of years ago at the counter of Zach's, Broadway and 103rd. He on the other side, his sleeves rolled up, his hands, his arms, in steaming water, washing dishes and frying pans and talking music. His dream of studying at Juilliard, the tiny practice room a rich lady from the Upper East or Upper West Side paid for. Listening all afternoon to him playing the small piano, his large romantic gestures, his hair wild, his fingers and hands amazing, classic Polish. He was from Little Italy. a high school dropout. Me, a graduate student at Columbia. Then I left for a year in Europe. And when I came back, I looked him up at Zach's. The manager told me he was dead. No one knew the facts. I thought of him for years. I remember we took him out for dinner on Amsterdam, and he unspooled his dream again and told us about the music he had written that week conducting with one hand. It was a loss I couldn't recover from. I was awake night after night, but I can't even remember his name. I lost it years ago. Dear Shelley, this was Adonis too. Praise him.